Advanced Financial Modeling, Topic 12, International Finance, Learning Objective number 3. We're going to forecast foreign exchange rates using PPP, IRP, and UFR. So this first theory I want to give you, or formula for forecasting exchange rate, is PPP, purchasing power parity, and it's a theory that states that exchange rates must adjust in the long run based on inflation differentials in two countries to prevent arbitrage in goods. So you couldn't have a change in an exchange rate and you buy goods in the country in which the currency devalued and sell them in the other country. There's no arbitrage in goods. So say the initial exchange rate of the euro is $1.30. That's today's spot rate, for today's transactions. And inflation in the U.S. is expected to be 10%, and inflation in Europe is expected to be 4%. If exchange rates don't change and U.S. good prices are 10% higher and euro are 4% higher, then European goods just got 6% cheaper if the exchange rate doesn't change. So there'd be incentives or possible arbitrage profits to go buy goods in Europe and sell them in America. So what you'd expect to happen in the long run is the exchange rate will adjust to eliminate that arbitrage. The formula for this is the new exchange rate, we'll say E1 for a 1-year forecast, where it's currency H over currency F, just any currency H or any currency F. And that would be, you can just, in this case, the dollar is H and the F is euro, is equal to today's exchange rate times 1 plus the inflation levels in country H divided by 1 plus inflation levels in country F to the T power. And again, we're just doing a 1-year forecast. So today's exchange rate is $1.30. This is dollar over euro exchange rate. Make sure you do dollar over euro inflations, and you can see the forecasted exchange rate is $1.375. And at that exchange rate, there's no longer an arbitrage in goods. The prices of goods are the same as they were before when looking at exporting or importing from one country to another. And you can see what this implies is that the euro is appreciating about 6%, which is that difference in inflations. So that's another interpretation of PPP. It's not exactly precise, but if one country has, say, 6% higher inflation, that currency will devalue by that 6%, and the country with 6% lower inflation will appreciate. So what you see here is about a 6% appreciation of the euro. So looking at another example for an indirect quote currency, suppose the spot price of the Polish zloty is 3 zloty per dollar. Inflation in the US is 3%, inflation in Poland is 7%. So remember, inflation is bad for a currency, according to this model, and the country with the higher inflation, their currency will devalue, a country with the lower inflation will appreciate. So just applying my formula, my forecast of the zloty per dollar is today's zloty per dollar exchange rate, 3 times 1 over zloty over dollar inflation. Make sure it's always consistent. If it's zloty over dollar exchange rate, it's zloty over dollar inflations, and you expect the zloty exchange rate to go to 312 zloty per dollar. And so if it's gone from 3 to 312, that's about a 4% appreciation of the dollar, which is what you'd expect if US has 4% lower inflation. Now, one more model. So that's PPP, purchasing power parity. If you assume there's no arbitrage in international bonds, in other words, interest rates reflect simple inflation differentials in each country, then I have a new formula. It looks a lot like the old formula, but instead of I, inflation, I use R, because we can say that in theory, the only differences you should observe in bond or in rates of returns should be differences in inflation. So that just allows me to calculate an exchange rate based on interest rates versus inflation, which is really important because it's easy to get the interest rates of two countries' bonds instead of trying to get inflation forecasts from economists. So here's an example here of interest rates and spot rates. And if I go to the spreadsheet, if today's price of the euro is $1.10, I would forecast based on these interest rates, 1.69 in the US for 1 year, negative 0.5 at this point for euro for 1 year on this date, and you'd get an exchange rate of 112. So what you see is in this case, the euro is appreciating because the US has higher interest rates, which implies it has higher inflation. And if I want to get the expected yen price of $1, I would take today's yen price of $1 over 1 plus yen over 1 plus US interest rates, and I get 104. So that is forecasting exchange rates. There's one last model, and it's a pretty simple model, that forward exchange rates, which are quoted by banks, are also good predictors, unbiased predictors of future exchange rates. So banks are always willing, or oftentimes willing, to quote exchange rates for forward date deliveries. So if I wanted to call my local bank and ask what's the exchange rate for exchanging dollars for euros 1 year from now, and that quote, we call it a forward rate, that has also been shown to be an unbiased predictor of future exchange rates. In the next topic, we'll talk about hedging foreign exchange transaction losses.